As I was directing my men, like this, the shrapnel hit my right wrist and into my neck. So I turned around to the corpsman and I said, I don't remember his name, and he says, "I can't help you, Sarge." And he turned around and his shoulder was off. He had his shoulder cut right off.
Island, more than 6.
It took 36 days, and the lives of 6,800 U.S. servicemen before Iwo Jima was secure. The South Pacific island was considered vital in defeating Japan and ending World War II. In Arlington, Virginia, President Clinton called on all Americans to live up to the valor of those who fought at Iwo Jima. Mr. Clinton noted that 27 Americans were given Congressional Medals of Honor for that famous battle, more than for any other operation of the war. President Clinton is in his own battle over his nominee.
Where it is remembered, uncommon valor was a common virtue.
When the Marine Corps tells you it was the toughest battle they ever had, and golly, I was there and I did my part, and I helped the country, you feel a little bit good inside.
Louis Lawn was a 24-year-old supply captain when the Marines hit the beaches of Iwo Jima February 19, 1945. After 5 days of heavy fighting, the American flag was raised on Mount Suribachi in a moment that has come to symbolize victory in the Pacific.
We thought simply when they had that hill, the rest of it was going to be a piece of cake.
It wasn't. The fight for Iwo Jima would drag on for more than a month, the bloodiest battle in Marine Corps history. Fred Haynes was an operations officer.
Iwo Jima was like Gettysburg for 36 days. Or Antietam for 36 days. It was a continuing, grinding fight.
With Japan's home islands just 700 miles away, the Americans needed Iwo Jima as an airbase for bombing runs. But there were 20,000 tenacious Japanese soldiers hidden in caves and fortified bunkers.
You could be shot at by somebody, and you knew you were being shot at because your buddy next door to you just got hit. And yet you couldn't find who it was.
6,800 Americans were killed, more than 17,000 others wounded. And in the small theater that was Iwo Jima, everyone was on the front lines.
You get out of your foxhole in the morning, and you find all this metal around that hadn't been there the night before. There'd be a couple of foxholes in which nobody left. And each morning it was like Russian roulette, because I just felt again, my golly, I was lucky.
Today, the lucky veterans gathered and remembered friends and fellow soldiers lost in their wrenching victory at Iwo Jima. In the shadow of their memorial, a younger generation paid respect.
We must work to create a nation worthy of the generation that saved it for our freedom.
And the veterans themselves, now in their late 60s and 70s, reflected on a sacrifice that for them still carries meaning.
Believe in your country. Stand up for the things that are important. I think those are messages.
Bob Orr, CBS News, Washington.
Because I think that the rest of us...
were remembered today by President Clinton in a special ceremony in Arlington, Virginia. The courage of 30,000 soldiers who fought on Iwo Jima was captured in the image of the Marines raising the American flag on that island. More than 6,000 Americans died in the fight for Iwo Jima, way out in the Pacific, south of Japan.
Admiral Nimitz put it perfectly. Among the Americans who served on Iwo Jima, uncommon valor was a common virtue. To be worthy of that sacrifice, we must determine in this time to remain the strongest nation in the world so that our freedom is never again threatened.
The ceremonies at the Marine Corps Memorial in Arlington, Virginia included an aerial salute as well.
Here in New York, aboard the aircraft carrier Intrepid, which saw action in the Pacific, the Battle of Iwo Jima was remembered in special ceremonies. The original statue of the Marine flag raising was rededicated on the ship's hangar deck today, as News 4's Ari Adzer reports.
The battle started 50 years ago. After 36 days of intense resistance from the Japanese, the U.S. Marines had captured the island of Iwo Jima.
It's just hell, that's all. People were shooting at you, were ducking. You know, when a bullet goes by you, you can hear it. It makes a snapping noise like that. So you heard that all day long, and they're just hoping that they wouldn't hit you.
It's the most enduring symbol of the Battle of Iwo Jima, possibly of the entire war. This is the original statue of the Marines raising the flag on Iwo Jima. After 50 years in a warehouse, the restored statue is unveiled to an audience of Iwo Jima survivors. Pictures of the flag raising captivated the American public, but the Marines had more important worries on their minds. At the time when you were fighting on Iwo Jima, you didn't realize the historic implications it would have, did you?
Oh, hell no. That's a farthest thought from your mind. The only thought you have is staying alive in a situation like that.
The Iwo Jima veterans were paid tribute with memorial wreaths. 19,000 Americans were wounded on Iwo Jima, and nearly 7,000 more died there, all to capture a small island, which allowed American bombers to attack mainland Japan. Battles like Iwo Jima don't happen anymore. The fighting was so fierce, the strategic importance so great, that it's hard for Americans born after World War II to understand the historical significance of Iwo Jima.
My hope is that no young person ever has to go through that or anything close to it.
Thank God I'm here 50 years later. Many good friends, many close friends, they didn't make it back.
50 years later, Iwo Jima's impact is still being felt. The costliest battle the U.S. Marines ever fought. At the Intrepid Air and Space Museum, Ari Odzer, News 4 New York.
Tonight at 11 o'clock, Gabe Pressman interviews a veteran of Iwo Jima who won the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions there. Luke?
Now to the O.J. Simpson trial, and a new poll out tonight that shows many lawyers predict he'll go free. A national
captured the island from the Japanese. More than 6,000 died. The pivotal battle was memorialized by the famous scene of U.S. soldiers hoisting a flag atop Mount Suribachi. In a tribute at Arlington National Cemetery, President Clinton honored the soldiers bloodied in the fierce battle.
To be worthy of that sacrifice, we must determine in this time to remain the strongest nation in the world so that our freedom is never again threatened. And we must work to create a nation worthy of the generation that saved it for our freedom.
In 36 days, U.S. casualties numbered 26,000 killed and wounded, including 3 of the Marines who raised the Stars and Stripes over that tiny island in the Pacific.
And here in New York, survivors of the Iwo Jima assault gathered at the Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum for a solemn memorial. Deborah Quintana reports now on an inspirational ceremony.
The heroes of undaunted courage who 50 years ago today stormed the beaches of Iwo Jima and found themselves in the bloodiest battle in Marine Corps history. Most of us associate the victory at Iwo Jima with this, the most famous World War II photograph. In a ceremony emceed by Channel 11's Marvin Scott, veterans were reunited aboard the Intrepid Sea, Air, Space Museum to unveil the statue inspired by the famous image. This is the original model of the famous statue, which is in Washington, D.C. This statue was discovered in a warehouse where for years it sat in decay. What was once a pile of dusty ruin has been completely restored to mark the 50th anniversary of the Iwo Jima battle. The capture of Iwo Jima, a tiny island only 4 miles long, was a strategically crucial triumph. The assault lasted 36 days, costing 6,000 American lives. 20,000 were wounded.
As I was directing my men, like this, the shrapnel hit my right wrist and into my neck. So I turned around to the corpsman and I said, I don't remember his name, and he says, I can't help you, Sarge. And he turned around and his shoulder was off. He had his shoulder cut right off.
When the flag was being raised at Iwo Jima, many of the men were unable to see it. They were on another part of the island fighting. But for those at Mount Suribachi, it is a moment that they vividly remember. Medical corpsman Greg Emery was there. While he bandaged a wounded man, Emery glanced up to witness this most famous moment.
Certainly none of us recognized the significance of it at the time. We were glad it was up, but its only significance to us was a military significance.
Wreaths symbolizing the men who died at Iwo Jima stirred a somber note in the hearts of these veterans.
Emotional. Very emotional.
Their sacrifice stands as testament to their valor. Deborah Quintana, Channel 11, News at 10.
Still a lot more news ahead tonight. New York Senator Pat Moynihan